Welcome to this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us author Steve McKinney. He has been in the fitness industry for over 30 years, owner of Fitness and More Inc., and is a first-class certified personal fitness trainer. He's the innovator of the 3W system of fitness and is a best-selling author of the book, The Gospel of Fitness, available on Amazon. He's also a pastor of Grace East Church. And today we'll be talking about his book, The Gospel of Fitness. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Oh, my pleasure to be here, KJ. It's always great to see you. It's always great to be on your show.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show once again, this time on the Author's Voice with KJ, and both the time earlier on it was all very, very useful for the audience. Great show that, and still going on very strong. And this one also, because this one focuses more on the book, we'll be able to talk more on the book itself, The Gospel of Fitness. But before we come to the book, Steve, being a gym owner, gym into fitness industry, I want to understand first the story behind becoming an author itself. Tell us a bit about you, about your becoming an author.
Love it. Yeah. So I started the fitness, the training many years ago, and I started in my garage over 30 years ago. When I started, what I did was I just had people come in. It was kind of a monthly membership thing. And what I noticed was people would ask me questions. Hey, can you write up a routine for me? Can you show me how to diet? And so what I realized was people needed individual help. So I stopped the monthlies and I just went to one-to-one private training. And then in that one-to-one private training, I kept records of every client and I looked at what they could do, what they couldn't do. But the big thing, KJ, what I was looking for is what could they do for a lifetime, not just for a short period of time, but for a lifetime. And so keeping those notes together, I just started adjusting my workouts. Fast forward 30 years or so later, I was at a conference a while back, and it was a pastor's conference. And so I went there by myself. I'd known a guy, he was in Florida. And when we were there, he knew I was a trainer. He said, hey, let's go to the gym. I want you to train me. So we went to the gym and I took him through my workout that I write about all in the book. I write the whole workouts. They're all in the book. And he said, man, that was the best training I've ever had. And so we just became friends and collaborated on that. Well, about 6-8 months ago, I guess, he would always have me on his podcast and we would just talk a lot. One day he was calling me and he said, hey, I have a few questions. So he's asking me questions. His name's Pete. And I said, Pete, listen, I've got a book that I've written. I said, I didn't really have an idea. Maybe I'll publish it. Maybe I won't. I wasn't thinking too much about it. I was just writing a book. I love to collect information. And he said, well, that's interesting. He said, I have a publishing company. And he said, would you send me a copy of the book? Now, I don't know how many, so I sent it over. He said, we'd love to work with you. And I don't know what people think, but for me, that was a God-ordained moment right there, to where that came together. And then from there, I went on a book tour. They set one up in Florida for me. I went into Missouri. I've done, Illinois, and then I've done podcasts all over the world. And you're one of my favorites, by the way, and I love being on your show. So that was the background in that book. And then, I take it a little further. So when I sent it over, he said he really liked it, but I knew I wasn't completely done. And so I just told him, I said, okay, I'm going to refine this. And as I sat and looked at the book, I thought, I need to make some adjustments here. Now, I'm not a great writer, but KJ, I write sermons every single week. And so I thought, well, here's what I'll do. This book is going to be just like I write a sermon. I'm going to put it in order. I'm going to put stories behind it. I'm going to put illustrations behind it. And here's the fun part of it. A lot of my friends who've read it, they say, when I read your book, I can hear your voice in my mind talking to me just like you do when I hear you talk. And then we've had incredible results from that as well. So I'm I'm really excited about what's happening and just how it worked out. So that's kind of the story behind the story there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Steve, I want to understand more about the book, straightway to the book itself. Uh, it's a very nice name. Very, I really like it. But how should people look at it? What sort of book it is? Is it more about, as I said, you looked at it from a different angle and fitness? How should know people? How will you want to tell people what is in the book?
Oh, that's a great question. So the gospel of fitness. And so here's the question that I get a lot. Is it gospel or is it fitness? And my answer is yes. Yes. It is both gospel and it is both fitness. Now, if you think of the word gospel, the gospel means good news. So, I'm a pastor, and so I preach the gospel, but I also preach the gospel of fitness. And so the idea behind it was to take the idea of good news in the industry, in the fitness industry, and then to sort through all the things that I would call not so good news. There's so much information out there, misinformation out there. I just sort into the positive, into the good news. And then the idea behind the book is to make sure that people can learn to age gracefully. And what I do in there, KJ, I just tell story after story. I'll give you an example of kind of how the whole fitness thing started. Both of my parents died at a very young age. They died at 49 years old. And so and my mother died on Christmas morning, by the way. She died in my arms. And so that's a significant part of my life there. And the idea behind it was I just thought, oh my gosh, they could have lived longer had they taken care of themselves. So the motivation for me was to just tell people who are aging and to write about how aging works and to keep people motivated in the middle of that. Now, what I do with that is I tell those stories in the book. I'll tell the points that I want to make, but most things when it comes to introducing the book to people and giving them some background into things we fight against, I tell story after story. I relate personal stories in the book. I deal with a lot of people on a weekly basis, and that creates stories, and people love to read about the stories. They want to hear, how does this practically apply? So the way I write is it's more practical application, and I write in a very logical format. I like to write in step-by-step form. And to me, that is one of the most important things that I could do, is just show people simple ways and write in simple ways that people can understand, and taking the things that are so complex and to simplify those things. And, they say educators take something easy and make it hard, and teachers take something hard and make it easy. And so I write that from a teaching perspective, because that's kind of, my background is I do a lot of teaching. And so that's how I can break that down and make it understandable for the reader.
Absolutely, absolutely, Steve. And the book, if I understand, is doing very, very well. The earlier episode was doing well. I'm sure this episode will also do well. At least it's a lot of learning, but it's doing also very good. Bestseller on Amazon several times. Tell us a bit about that journey of yours. How does it look like? If I understand, this is your first book that will
Yes.
egg on to write on more books, guess.
Yes, absolutely. So as we start putting it together, I worked with the publisher, and it just talked about marketing. How do we do this? And so what we did, we got it on Amazon. Now, when you're a first-time author, Amazon will not let people pre-order. So there was no pre-order. So I had to really look at the marketing aspect. And so what I did was I set a launch date. And then as I was talking to the publisher, I said, well, we'll launch it. I said, what do I do from there? And he said, just sit at your computer. And he said, answer any questions that come out. He said, because it's going to kind of blow up. And that's exactly what it did. So I sat at my computer. I was at my computer 6 straight hours, just answering questions as people, as they begin to buy the book, and they had questions, are very excited about it. that was the first thing, and that was my initial kickoff. And that first day, boom, it shot really, really high. It really shot to the top. And then I kept that momentum going. And then what I noticed too is the more public appearances, the more speaking engagements, the more podcasts and things like that, that kept the book going really well. I then went to, they set up a book tour. I went on the book tour, and I did a week in Florida. And so I did a couple of public appearances there. I like to set up the book by explaining it to the crowd, and then I give them the time for question and answer. That went really well. Then I started doing some local things, and my biggest, I would say, interview in the middle of it is I did an interview at a large church. It was a two-day event. We did a Saturday night and a Sunday morning, and I think we sold a lot of books that weekend. I signed books for 2.5 hours. And so I know at the end of that one, my legs were hurting standing up signing books, but it was still a joy to meet all these people, to hear their stories, and, just to try to help them out. And so it was really fun in that aspect. And now, because I still run the gym business, I still run a jiu-jitsu school, I still run the church, I do a lot more podcasts now. And then, I was recently on one where I had a publisher reach out to me, a new publisher, and asked, did I have any other books in mind? I said, yeah, I have 3 other books. I always just say inside of me that still need to come out. And so, but I'm still focusing on this, but I'm just looking at those next steps. And the way that I set this book up is I started it off on a very, very basic level. I showed people all of the principles. There's the next step. I call this the kind of the beginner intro level. The next step is the intermediate level, and then the advanced level is the 3rd book. And then on that, the 4th idea of a book is to show different techniques and different ideas to show people how to lift weights in a different way, how to make sure that they still stay within the program, how to make sure that they don't chase shiny new objects or the latest fad that's out there, because all the information in the book is very science-based, and it's very factual, and it's very healthy for people to do the things that I do in there and show them how to live a lifestyle of fitness. So that's kind of how I approach that, the ideas that I have upcoming, and we'll see how that goes. I'm just taking this one day at a time. I'm enjoying the process. I'm staying in the moment, and I'm just having fun with it.
Absolutely. Staying in the moment. Let's stay with the gospel of fitness for a bit to understand it better. Steve, you talked about 3W system of fitness in this. I think that is a very important thing that you talk about in this particular book. If you can quickly tell us about that, so that audience will be egged on to understand more about this and to get this book of yours.
Absolutely. So as I said, I did a lot of interviews and a lot of public speaking. So when I do that, I tell people, hold up 3 fingers, and if you look at that, it makes a W. And so it's a little system that I have to get people to remember my system very easily. And so the 3 W's are this: it's weight training, walking, and watching your diet. Now, the weight training aspect is the most important thing. When people lift weights, as we age, we lose that strength, we lose that muscle. And when people lift weights, what we're doing is we're taking back that lost strength and that lost muscle. That is super important. That is the number one anti-aging thing that people can do. What's interesting is people, if they don't do things, they begin to lose muscle at the age of 35, and they lose about 1% to 2% of their muscle each and every year. And it doesn't seem like much at first, but in the long run, you look at that in a 10-year period, a 20-year period, you've lost a lot of muscle and you lost a lot of strength. Now, here's what's interesting when I go about this program, KJ, when I tell people the way that I have them lift weights, the way that I do it, and they lift, it's a very safe program, but you also have to put in the effort. But when you lift weights, what happens is your body sends these signals out. They're little messengers, we'll call them, and they're called myokines. And those myokines, they send signals from your muscles to your organs, to your brain, to other parts of your body. And what they're basically telling other parts of your body is they're saying, hey, listen, the way we're lifting weights right now it is good for us. And so they're sending signals to the other parts of the body, and what they're saying is, hey, come join the party because we're having a good time here and this is good for us. And it's really important to help your heart. Now, I don't look at the heart health from how many beats I can do per minute. I look at heart health from stroke volume. And what that means is the proper way to train, it reduces the amount of work that your heart has to do to pump blood throughout your body. If you can look at your resting pulse rate when you lift weights properly, and I've been lifting weights for 50 years, more than 50 years, actually probably 55 years now. I started at 9 years old. I'm 64 now. What that does, it reduces the stroke volume and it makes your heart beat easier. My resting pulse rate, KJ, is incredibly low. It's actually 38 beats per minute, which is extremely low. When I go to the doctor's office, I have to warn the nurse. I'm like, don't panic because this is going to be low, because I've had nurses when I call an ambulance for me because they think I'm gonna die right there. But I'm just like, my heart is very, very efficient. So that's the idea behind weight training. Now, the idea behind walking is just good for your soul. It's good for your brain. It's good for your mind. I tell people, get outside if you can. Look at the beauty of this creation in which we live. Walk, enjoy, take a look around, look up in the sky, look at the beauty. Don't just walk and don't see the things around you, because it's so important for our mind and our brain just to be healthy. And I tell them just 30 minutes of moderate walking after dinner seems to work best for people. It helps digest food. It helps, like I said, with your brain. It helps keep your metabolism moving. And a lot of people that come to me need to lose body fat. And so that's where watching your diet comes in. When you're watching your diet, you have to create a calorie deficit, but you want to do that in a proper way. You want to make sure your nutrition is very high. The volume of your food can be very high if you eat highly nutritious foods. So you're not starving all the time. Your body is just adapting and it's moving body fat. It's losing body fat slowly. Now, not everybody needs to lose body fat, but most people do. And even for those who don't, the system still works perfectly. We just go on a maintenance diet from there. But here's the beauty of it. These three things together make a perfect and simple program that people can do for the rest of their life. And I didn't mention this with the weight training, but I only suggest 2 weight training sessions per week for the long haul, 2 15-minute sessions per week, which most people think, oh, there's no way that would work. And when they start doing it, when I train a client that comes in, it takes me maybe 2 minutes to convince them that this is the proper way to train, because we use techniques like keeping your muscles under the load and things like that. Now, in the book, what I do is I start people out for 3 days a week, and I do have a copy of the book right here in my hand, and it's on the screen as well. But I start people out 3 days a week so they can learn the system. And then after that 2-week period, we cut them down to 2 days a week, and they begin to work. It begins to work perfectly for them. And then the upcoming project idea, I am going to change some ideas from that, and I'm going to teach people how to be your own trainer, how to interpret your own feedback from the workouts that you do, and then to make those adjustments. And then you can dictate how many days a week you want to work out in the middle of that. I never suggest more than 3 days per week. It's just not necessary. But in some cases, as people are older, 1 day a week, 1 15-minute session a week. I know this sounds like people like them from another world, but I have clients who work out with me 1 day a week, and it has changed their life. It's been absolutely incredible. The guy who had shingles and had shoulder problems, couldn't lift his arm over his head. I meet with him 1 day a week. When he comes in, he always shows me to lift his arms up and how well he's doing with that. So there's therapeutic benefits of what we do, and we do it in a proper fashion.
Absolutely, Steve. Well explained. It's amazing. 2 15-minute, sessions per week, and it will do the work for you. Unbelievable. But it is, you are doing it, and I'm sure a lot of people can try that on their own along with you. these are great things, and I want to understand from the book any particular thing that you specifically want to bring to attention of the readers, of the audience, any particular passage if you want to read for the readers, which will bring attention to
Oh,
that.
absolutely. So I'll give you some highlights here. So as I look at the book right here, and I'll kind of show you how I set it up. So in the content section, I have it set up in different ways. And one of the first things that people learn here is we look at the problem that we're dealing with. And the problem that we're dealing with, I call it what we're fighting. We're fighting 5 different things. We're fighting aging. We're fighting sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss. We're fighting fat gain, and that comes from what's called disuse atrophy, meaning I'm not using my muscles, so I'm losing my muscles, which lowers my metabolic rate. My metabolism gets lower, which you can eat the same food, but if your metabolism is lower, you're going to gain body fat. We're fighting the loss of balance. And KJ, one of the things that I deal with people a lot as they begin to age, and this starts at a younger, and this even is in younger people, but it's the loss of hope. And people begin to lose hope in what they can do. They get very discouraged in life because life is very hard in this day and age for people. There's so many things that are going on. We're so connected to each other through social media, and then people start comparing their lives with other people's lives, and they become hopeless. They're thinking, oh, I wish I could be like them. And I think that's one of the worst things that people can do. Those are just the things that people are fighting. And then I go on in the middle of that, and I begin to look, and I'm going to have to get my glasses here just to give you a little more detail, but I begin to look at mistakes that add to the problem. And I'll just give you the first one with that. The number one mistake, I call it going in like a lion and out like a lamb. And what happens with people is they'll go in, they'll start a workout program. They'll think, oh my gosh, I'm going to work out 5 days a week, an hour at a time, which I always say is a part-time job. And then what happens is they go in real strong, and about a month later, they go out like a lamb. And then I just begin to deal and explain to people, you have to have goals. You have to know how to prepare. You have to have a place to work out, and you want to make that place you work out. Maybe it's in their gym, or maybe it's in your home, but that place has to be what I call a sacred place for your workout. It's there for a reason. So all of those things give people they give them a proper perspective, but I show them how to set goals, and then I show them how to implement that plan in the middle of that. And one of the things I talk about is being willing to learn, and we have to be willing to learn. I'm a lifelong learner. As you can see behind me, I'm a book reader, so I'm always reading things. I'm always learning things, and I'm still learning as I grow in this day and age right now.
Absolutely. Always reading things, always learning things. But if I understand, this was the first time you wrote a book. So I want to understand, writing a book is not a very easy thing. You have to put all thoughts in mind, put it together. I want to understand for the audience, what was the most challenging part of writing this particular book of yours?
The hardest part for me, there are some things that I do that are very advanced when it comes to lifting weights. And the hardest part for me was to allow people and teach people to understand the proper way of lifting weights, the proper way of doing things without seeing it, without people looking at me doing it or training a client. And so breaking things down and putting them into a learnable form for people. How do you do an actual set? What does time under tension mean? What does time under load mean? How do you emphasize the negative part of a movement? What does that even mean? So trying to teach those things. A lot of people come in, they kind of know the ideas, but not everyone does. Even the advanced people that I talk to, KJ, I've talked to doctors who specialize in lifting weights and functional medicine and things like that. And when I explain what I do to them, and I just explain it, and I talk about training your muscles and saving your joints. And I tell them, I'm like, as you get older, joint health is so vitally important, because I see so many people, like when I went on the book tour, the people like, I can't extend my arm. I was doing this exercise years ago, and I injured it and it's not working correctly now. And so, but I've been on a show where a doctor, and I was explaining it to him, and he's 50 years old, very nice man. And I convinced him to change the way that he's training, because I said, he said, my joints hurt. And I said, that's not going to get better as you age. I said, you're throwing weights around, you're hurting your joints. And they just continued to decline. And he was 50 years old. And it really hits you in the 40s and 50s if you're not training correctly. But when you get into your 60s, it's way worse, because a lot of people have done so much damage. They can't do the things that they need to do. And so that was the hardest part, is just explaining the proper way to train to people, because I have to unload a lot of the stuff that people have already learned. And like I said, when you're looking at a 15-minute workout, people don't have any idea what that looks like. They don't understand what I'm talking about there. And some people just dismiss the idea without being willing to look at it from a different perspective. But like I said, I'm getting message after message. People are like, I'll get tagged in a Facebook post. I've lost 15 pounds in 5 weeks. That was a recent one. I'm feeling better. I'm training 2 days a week and enjoying the process. And then they'll always do a little Facebook picture, or a little picture, put it on Facebook when they're out walking and doing their 30-minute walk per day. So those kind of things really make a difference for people, and it puts a smile on their face, which is one of my goals as well, just to make the world a better place.
Absolutely. So to understand this, who is this book particularly for? Is it for everyone above 40, above 60? Who?
I generally look at, my target audience is people that are 50 and over for this book. And I talk about aging gracefully. Now, but the ideas, they apply to people across the board. I use these same principles to train athletes. I use these same principles to train CEOs of businesses. I use these same principles to train younger people. But you're always looking for a target audience, and my target audience is people 50 and over. But when I write in the book, I talk about how that aging process begins, and it begins at 35. But I think that anyone can learn and apply these principles to what they do at any age. I have clients that are 87. My aunt, 87 years old, comes in and trains with me. And then I have people, I have clients as young as 15 years old that trains with me. And these younger guys, they gain muscle in the middle of that. And so it's kind of fun to watch that.
Absolutely, Steve. So in a nutshell, what is it? What message, what key insights do you want your readers of the book to take away with them?
Yeah, I would say this. I look at this whole thing as medicine. I treat my exercise as medicine. I give you a dose of medicine and we look at the response of that. And so here's my big takeaway for everyone. Weight training is medicine for your body. Walking is medicine for your brain, and watching your diet is medicine for your biology. And those things put together, they work perfectly in a system. So that's my big takeaway. Just understand what you're doing is you're giving your body a dose of medicine. And if you treat your workouts as if you would treat a doctor's visit, you'll have way less doctor's visits.
Absolutely. And talking about your upcoming books, 3 of them you talked about. Let's understand it better. When do we expect your next book then?
KJ, I'm behind the scenes in it. I'm still talking to publishers, and I'm just going to ride the wave and see what happens. I don't put deadlines or dates on myself because that creates too much pressure. So for me, I'm just going to see what happens. I got a meeting coming up. I think it's in early May, and I'm just going to talk and see what's the best options for me at this point. It's, I have plenty of time. And I'm just going to see what happens with people in the middle of that, or, with the publishing in the middle of that. That's the big deal. It's just finding publishers that are going to, just going to treat you right. The publisher I have is great. But I think, as I talk to him, they might move in a different direction. So we'll just see in the middle of it. So I'm going to start working on it as we behind the scenes. I'm just going to ride the wave as it goes and see where the wave takes me. That's kind of what I do in the middle of this. And like I said earlier, this came to me when I wasn't looking. So I'm in the same way. The last podcast I was on, the person that was interviewing me said, "Would you be interested in talking to our company?" I said, "Oh, absolutely. I'm interested in, any of that." And KJ, not a lot of things I do also. I still do some online training. So anyone in your area, which is across the country, I would love to train somebody in your area. That would be a lot of fun. And they can contact me through my website, which is fitnessandmore.net. And they can find me there. That's the easiest way to find me. And I'm also on Facebook as Steve McKinney. And then Instagram is Fitness and More STL. So those are the big ways. And they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Steve McKinney as well there.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure, and thank you for highlighting this book for me. It's a big part of me. So thank you so much.